Thanks for tuning in to the Medivac Podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac Podcast. If you're new here, there's a price for the show. You have to share it with a friend or family member if you're getting something out of today's episode. We've got a pretty interesting guest. We're diving into the world of first responders a little bit more today and lately. Please welcome Marc Cresswell to the show. He's a former 11 Bravo. He did spend some time in the Army, about 4 years, and then after he got out of the military, pursued flight medicine. So he's been a flight paramedic and held a multitude of instructional roles and executive roles with Acadian Air Services, where he still currently works. So, Marc, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome, Marc.
Yep, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Well, we're gonna dive right into your story, and it starts. I mean, I'm sure a lot earlier than this, but your military career starts in the early 90s, or late 80s, right? Into
That's
the
correct.
90s. So why the military? What inspired you to join?
So I came from a small town, a small family, and I really didn't want to burden my parents with higher education. So I figured I'd join the military and get the GI Bill and go to school. And that was the real underlying reason.
Yeah, and infantry it was.
11 Bravo, right out of Fort Benning, and then transferred into 11 Mike when we became a mechanized unit. So got trained up on the Bradleys.
Excellent.
And this was kind of all while, Desert Storm, Desert Shield was kicking off a little bit. What was kind of your perception of that? I'm sure you were young, 17, 18?
Yeah, so this all kicked off in August of 1990. It was kind of shocking. We trained up in Fort Hood, Texas. Qualified on the Brads. We loaded up the Brads on the railhead, and we were ready to ship out to the Houston Ship Channel. And the air war began, and the ground war lasted 100 hours. And they said, we don't need your help no more. So we didn't get to deploy. Kind of disappointing. Had a lot of training, wanted to use it, but fate saw otherwise.
That's understandable. They spend all that time training. You want to get an opportunity to use it sometimes, good or bad, I suppose.
Correct.
And so you just did 4 years. Was that just time to get out? What was the thought process? Just wanted to do your 4 and go to school?
100%. Yeah, I really just wanted to, earn the GI Bill money and go to school. Many years before that, my grandfather was a customer of Acadian ambulance. They brought him back and forth to the hospital a lot. And I was 10, 12 years old, got to ride in the front of the ambulance with a couple of the guys. We lived out in the country, so I got to play with the sirens. So that kind of whet my appetite for EMS. And that's kind of what I wanted to do when I got out.
Okay. So you, where'd you end up going to school?
So I went to a vocational school. I graduated in the middle of April. Shortly thereafter, we were roping cattle. My roping partner, his horse, was running to tag a steer and got caught in the mud. The horse flipped over, fell on him, broke his back. And, that was before the days of cell phones. So I took my horse and ran to the closest place to call 911, rode back. And as I'm arriving, AirMed 1 with a flight paramedic by the name of Ed Murray landed to pick up my roping partner. I'm out in the country, so we lashed the horses up to a tree, and I rode in with them. And when we landed at the trauma center, I told Ed, I said, I really want this job. I was like, I really want this job.
Yeah.
And so I got hired on with Acadian. I did Acadian's paramedic class, and shortly thereafter, I got 2-3 years under my belt, and I was welcomed into the AirMed program.
Wow.
And how intensive did you think the programming was for that? Before we dive into that, I do have to say that those vocational courses, such a missed opportunity that a lot of people overlook.
I would agree, man. I got a really good education there. And I think back in the 70s and 80s, when the push for higher education nothing wrong with higher education, came around, that vocational schools just kind of went by the wayside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now I really believe that you're seeing a resurgence in vocational education. Look, the world needs plumbers, electricians, they need EMTs, and all the other trades that go along
Yeah.
with hands-on work. And
Absolutely.
And you know what's funny is this higher education that you talked about too is these are the jobs that are getting replaced by AI. so we're kind of we need that. We need people who are willing to use their hands again. And I think that's an underestimated statement, especially as we're talking about bringing back manufacturing to the United States. People forget that, yes, that entails you using your hands. And, how does that play with, the generations now where we don't want to do that kind of work anymore.
Sure. Yeah. I think there's also
it'll really be shocking if they develop an AI robot that can run Romex through a new build house pretty soon.
Yeah, also true. I think there's also the piece that people don't look at. Like you can be making six figures right out of high school with a basic vocational degree. There's a plumbing service here in San Antonio who will hire you off the street and they pay you six figures to go to plumbing school, and then they pay you, your starting salary is $120,000 a year after you're finished with plumbing school. And they do the advertisements all over the radio. You can start today. We'll pay you today. Like fantastic opportunities for young people, and people are just not taking advantage of it, I think.
Exactly.
Not to go off on too much of a tangent, but
I think it's a great point. I think that vocational and they have the programs for it, right? That the Voc Rehab, all these programs to go use that post 9/11 for these programs. It's so important. And the higher education push was, oh man, was it not just a scam, right? And I think that people are starting to realize, you got to have a plan before you go to school. Otherwise, you're just checking a box that's probably not going to be applicable to the real world.
yeah.
And I believe there's a role in higher education for EMS. I really believe a 4-year degree is good, but until reimbursement catches up to raise the salary of EMS providers, when you have the option to go to a 2-year school to become an RN and make $30,000 more than a paramedic, I don't know if mandating a 4-year degree for EMS is ready yet until reimbursement and salaries catch up with the regular 4-year degree medical programs.
Definitely agree with you there. Yeah, it's funny that emergency medicine is one of the most impactful job positions you can have. You're impacting somebody's life at that very moment. It's one of the most, I think, harsh parts of medicine altogether, and yet they're the most underpaid at the same time. You're putting your body on the line. You're actively responding to things in a dire emergent situation, whereas a medical provider in a air conditioned office, seeing five or seven patients a day is making 4 or 5 times what you guys are. It's interesting to me.
It's time to catch up to those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are doing hard work. Putting your bodies and lives on the line for it sometimes. So I guess continuing chronologically. So you do your few years on the ambulance. You get invited into the air service, and then what's that look like from there? Is there additional training you have to go through to learn how to ride on the helicopters and fixed wing airplane? I'm assuming.
Yeah. So look, I'm getting ready to blow you guys' mind with this. So Acadian Air Med started in 1981, and we've always, up until 2017, have been a single provider air medical unit. I know it sounds wild, but we did it, and we did it good. So what you did, we were in the BO 105s. You did a basic 1-day orientation, and you just did a lot of ride-alongs until 6 people signed you off as you were competent and ready to go. And I had really great trainers, Jimmy Greco, Porter Taylor. I got to drop some names because they were just so great. Scott Saunier. And I completed my training while I was working full time on the ambulance. So you did this on your days off. So you would work a 24-hour shift, maybe take a day off, go ride that night, ride the next day, and then you went back to work on the ambulance. And then I did all of my clearing in about 90 days. The expectation at that time was if you can't, swallow it all in 90 days, then maybe this ain't right for you. So in 90 days, I was cleared. I was cut loose on my own.
Okay.
And so, your time in the ambulance service, like let's walk through some of your experiences there. Kind of average responses. What are you doing? What's your day to day look like?
Yeah. So our service is basically rural EMS. Not uncommon to have 15 to 20-minute response times, and in a place that we call a parish. You guys call a county. This parish, 57,000 people. Very large, very agricultural. So we saw, your normal trauma, your normal medical, but a lot of agricultural incidents. Um, a lot of really bad car accidents, way out, where you were waiting a long time for help to come to back you up. We had 4 ambulances in a parish. Each one of them were 15 to 20 miles from each other. So if you needed 2 or 3 units, you were running this scene by yourself, 30, 40 minutes.
Oh, wow.
With the exception of one department, there were 13 volunteer fire departments around, and they would take their time to ramp up too. So not uncommon to be on scene by yourself with 2 or 3 patients for 15, 20 minutes, maybe even longer.
Wow.
So what's a highlight? What's a call that really stands out to you?
I tell people this whenever they're getting ready to be a paramedic. The most awesome tool you have in that box of goodies is this hand, putting it on somebody's shoulder and letting them know that they're going to be all right. I'm really big into, empathy. And we took this old guy home one time. He was way up in his 80s. He was a cattle farmer, and he was going home to die. And he said he wanted to see his cows one more time. So we passed up his house. We went to his barn, and Acadian has this policy that you don't take an ambulance off of a hard surface. So we took the ambulance off the hard surface and we backed into his barn. And he said, there's a feed bucket. If you get the feed bucket and beat it on the side of the ambulance, the cows will come.
Okay.
And we got some feed and beat it up. And the cows came to the back of the ambulance. We had the doors open. The old man got to see his cows, one last time.
Wow.
And, it's not a blood and gut story, but it really is a good story about how you should treat others, in their very last moments. I have plenty of blood and gut stories if you want to hear that, but that's the highlight, I believe, of my ambulance time, was just taking care of that old man.
Well, I think that one tracks. What's the purpose of getting into this is to help people, right? And that's the acknowledgement of that. Even if it's a sad ending.
Yeah. We had another one, and I told you guys about having to be out by yourself for 20 or 30 minutes. This guy had wrecked into a hurricane fence, and if they got that support pipe, and it went just north of his lung, and it pinned him up against the back of the truck. And fire department was on the way, but they were 20 minutes out. The guy's somewhat agonal, barely awake. And we devised this plan to take the pressure off of him. There was a welding truck there. We were going to grab the victim's vehicle and pull it backwards, kind of off the pipe, to get some relief, to kind of like let him sit up. Well, the truck went a little bit too fast, and we pulled the pipe out.
Oh.
And at the time, the helicopter's landing, we stuffed it full of gauze, packed it up, and we got that guy to the trauma center, and saved the guy's life. So as far as for like a memorable call, that would probably be one. I don't smoke cigarettes, but I needed a cigarette after that.
Sure. Yeah. Understandably.
Yeah.
So being out in a rural area like that, mentioning that you have, 15, 20-minute response times, that provides an additional layer of complexity for you guys on scene as paramedics. Because like if you're in a city, you might have 5, 7, maybe 10 minutes ride to a hospital from a point of injury. But you guys, I mean, 20, 30 minutes sometimes. So stabilization and patient care, I guess on site and then during transport is significantly longer. So are you guys trained? Do you have additional training to help with stabilization, things like that, or ensuring survival in long situations like that?
So we do now. Um, Vermilion Parish, we have a small community named Gaydon, small, 2,000 people. That's a solid 1 hour from a cardiac care facility.
Hmm.
And, we transported people that far with, congestive heart failure, patients, with chest pain. At that time, we didn't have 12 leads. So, you'd basically treat the symptoms, lots of nitro, some aspirin, give
Yeah.
them a little morphine, and keep their pressures up and drive for an hour all the way to Lafayette, Louisiana.
Hmm.
Um, we were fortunate. We had a really robust paramedic training program. So every single provider on those 4 ambulances, 3 shifts, you could do the math, we were all paramedics, except for there was one single guy that remained as an EMT. So you almost always had 2 paramedics on scene taking care of a patient almost all the time in Vermilion Parish.
Okay.
You'd never see that now.
Too expensive or not enough qualified individuals or
Staffing,
staffing?
So,
staffing.
for our audience base, can you explain the difference, EMT basic versus paramedic?
Yeah. So there's 3 levels. Actually, there's 4. There's a EMR, emergency medical responder, which is very, very basic first aid and learning how to operate the ambulance. EMTs, which is 110, 140 hours worth of training, plus some clinical education. And you learn a little bit more than the EMRs, splitting techniques, some airway maneuvers, obviously CPR, things of that nature. The next step you can take is EMT intermediate, and you learn how to use IV skills, fluid resuscitation, as well as some other advanced airway maneuvers. And then finally, paramedic, where paramedic is a course where you do, 1,000 hours or more of training, where you're able to give cardiac medications, you're able to give medications to support blood pressure, sedatives, pain control measures, using narcotics, IVs. You're able to, intubate the trachea with an endotracheal tube, as well as you're able to use intraosseous infusion. That's a bone drill where you drill into the bone and you fluid resuscitate through the bone. Um, and paramedics, once they achieve their certification and get a year or two, we put them through what's called CCT, critical care transport, where they learn how to use ventilators, use cardiac support devices such as, impeller pumps, LVADs, IV pumps, things of that nature. So that's kind of like the final step in an EMS career at the clinical level.
Okay, and you said it's not very common to have a couple of those on the ambulance because of staffing.
Correct.
Is this also, are you seeing like less pursuit of paramedic?
I think subjectively I could say that, but back in the 80s and 90s, if you were a paramedic, you had one avenue, and that was working on an ambulance. And then industrial medicine came around, so there was an avenue to go and work, like in a plant or offshore, the Gulf of Mexico. And now you're starting to see paramedics integrate into the emergency room,
Yeah.
physicians' offices, doing intake in psychiatric hospitals. So there's a lot more opportunity for people and still maybe the same number of applicants, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Yeah, that does make
Yeah.
sense.
And think about this, the industrial side and those things, they don't have reimbursement issues. They got money, so they pay better.
Okay.
So that's really hard to combat.
Now, in your guys's, I guess in your parish or your county, in my experience, police and fire are integrated services, right? And ambulance is usually like a third party service. So like in our little city we're in right now, Selma, right outside of San Antonio, we have Selma PD, we have Selma FD, but the ambulance service is an independent company. Is that your guys' is obviously set up as an independent company? Do you know? And I'm sure I've learned this at some point, but what are the broad strokes reasons as to why we see integrated fire, we see integrated police, but we don't see we see integrated hospitals, things like that, but we don't see that with the emergency medicine services. Can you explain that, or at least give your inference or understanding?
Yeah, so in Louisiana, a little different. There's no regulatory reason why. The city of Baton Rouge, city of New Orleans, city of Shreveport, they run municipal EMS.
Okay.
And they're either part of or getting ready to be a part of the fire service. Baton Rouge is trying to go to that now. There was some talk in New Orleans that was going to happen. But back in 1971, when the federal government basically said that funeral homes could not be in the EMS any longer, we had 3 young guys that got together with an idea and started Acadian Ambulance. And the parish was very thankful. They didn't have to put out any money for it.
Yeah.
We sold memberships. And it just became the model in this area. Acadian Ambulance did 911. We didn't call it 911 back then. And we did hospital-to-hospital transfers and doctor's offices. And that's pretty much the way it's been in Louisiana. Fire and EMS are integrated in some other cities, New York, Seattle, LA, a lot of places like that, they are integrated.
Sure.
But as you move more into more rural communities and stuff, private ambulance is the 911 provider.
Yeah. I've always been curious about that. It seems kind of like a disservice to me because we're paying firefighters and police officers a lot more, and they have their pension retirement that's based off of state or government employment, which is typically far better than private. So I've always been curious why they didn't start integrating ambulance services into that, having paramedics on government salaries and on government retirement. It makes a lot of sense because, again, what you guys do is so important.
I guess my argument, and I'm going to be a proponent for private EMS,
Sure.
That's the only job that I've ever had, is if you're running 10,000 911 calls in a community of 2 million people, well, only those 10,000 people are paying for that ambulance service. But in an integrated system, you got 2 million people paying tax dollars to run an ambulance service that only serves a group of 10,000 people.
I see.
So
that's how
why
fire
not
works,
let
right?
it be a fee for service and let the private guys take that on and save that direct cost and the legacy cost of retirees and pensions. It's really expensive for our municipal system to do that.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's just due to my ignorance, which is why I ask. I'm not familiar, so I appreciate your insight, and I think it's a completely valid point. So we, I guess, where were we at? Joining the air service.
Well, besides the bloody, gory stories. No.
Yeah.
I'm curious on, all this experience, 4 levels, paramedic being level 4. You're obviously thinking, hey, I've checked the box there. I want to move on to the next thing. You kind of got inspired when you were younger with your roping partner. What did that transition look like, and how did you become a flight medic? What's the difference? What's the extra qualifications?
Yeah, so now we are an accredited service now, so we're PAIMS accredited. We are looking for a bare minimum of 3 years as a paramedic, and that's a bare minimum. Our most successful candidates have more experience than that. We put them through a whole battery of exams and tests to select the people that we select. We're fortunate because we have a whole group of paramedics that we have intelligence on how they perform on the ground ambulance to select from. Our nurses come from external groups, so we put them through a big battery of tests. They go through the same orientation. In our in our system, we don't silo paramedics and nurses separately. They do the same job. They dress the same. They act the same. They have the same protocols. So they get the same training. And that is upwards of 3 to 5 months where they're riding along third person and then riding along with an experienced provider and go through a whole list of competencies and checkoffs to validate that they are cleared and ready to operate as a two-person crew on the helicopter. Um, we put them through a couple of weeks of orientation where they're learning finger thoracotomy, they're learning advanced airway skills, they're learning the Hamilton T1 ventilator as well as the Sapphire IV pumps. We offer a slew of additional protocols that the ground ambulance doesn't offer. So we carry blood, so they learn that. As well as we carry the Zoll Auto Pulse CPR device. That enables us to take a cardiac arrest victim and transport them by air versus treating them on the ground until they're either have a pulse or they're pronounced dead. So all of those things take 3 to 5 months before the candidate is cleared.
Wow. And did you see like a difference in kind of calls and injuries, more remote locations? What was the biggest difference for you?
Yeah, so you saw a higher acuity of patients 100% of the time. So you're on an ambulance where you may have one patient that's really serious and 10 that are, just, what we like to call status 3. They need a monitor and they need their blood pressure checked. Almost all of our patients in air are high acuity, some sort of extremist, whether it be trauma or medical, or inter-facility transports where it's almost always ICU level treatment. The air ambulances that we deploy every day are transporting about 2 patients per day. But the difference being is we're going those distances. So a call can take 2 to 3 hours of evolution until they're cleared up. So 2 patients could take you 6, maybe even 10 hours to do.
Wow.
Okay. So I did that. Reminded me of a question I wanted to ask. This is probably pertains more towards the ambulance service side of things because, on the flight side, you are dealing with more critical care before, right? So there's probably a triage or a location issue. But what percentage of calls or maybe a couple examples of some calls that you got that are just people taking advantage or just hypochondriacs or don't really need an ambulance service at all. They're just, calling to call. Does that happen often?
It does. And I can say this because I still do work on the ground ambulance sometimes. We, way back in the 90s, we did see psychiatric emergencies, but not to the extent that we see now. And it was rare back in the 90s that you saw overdoses. You had them, but it's not uncommon now to run 10 calls or 12 calls in one day on the ground ambulance, and 3 to 4 of them be psychiatric, 1 or 2 be an overdose.
Wow.
I was just, when I started getting back on the ground ambulance in 2019, 2020, I was just stupefied of how much Narcan we were using.
Yeah.
And that's part of fentanyl crisis and whatnot. But you are right. There are people that use the 911 system when they should be using the taxi system.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got the punch cards.
They really should.
And
And look, this is not to take away from the ground ambulance guys. They when we can't fly, they're taking our critical patients.
Sure.
Yeah.
But they're also taking the abusers, the destitute, the patients that we don't get on air, they get on ground.
Yeah, and I mean, do you think, your kind of opinion on this, is it is just anxiety? Is it, I mean, they know it for a fact that something's wrong, but it's not. Like, is it just, what do you think?
I learned this reading Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink.
Yeah.
Like when somebody comes to you with a problem, it's important to them, while it may not be important to you. So me as a provider, I may be thinking, this is a BS call, but to that person, it's important to them for whatever reason, whether it's an illogical reason or if it's a predetermined reason. Um, I, I don't know why the populace is using 911 on a regular basis when they should be taking a vehicle or calling a taxi or calling an Uber or, for lack of a better term, walking to the hospital.
Because it's expensive, right? I mean, every time you're getting charged personally for that.
It's the expense is very, very high. And when patients are uninsured, they don't care. And when they are a Medicaid recipient, they can't be balance billed. So there's really no ramifications to doing it. There's nobody that can punish them or counsel them, or there's no financial tie to an irresponsible use of 911. So therefore, they think that it's totally appropriate.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. It gives them the opportunity and, basically reinforces their decision to abuse it at that point. That's an interesting concept. What's your thoughts on? I mean, obviously the fentanyl crisis is leading to a lot more overdoses, but you're seeing, the psychiatric that's a tremendous increase. Mentioning from the 90s until today, even though if we look back in history, things like psychiatric institutions, those were shut down in the early 80s. That was like 82, 84. So like even in the 90s, you would think after the institutions being shut down, you would see psychiatric calls maybe concurrent with what you're seeing today, but it sounds like something else is going on. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on that, or is this just your experience on the receiving end?
I have a personal hypothesis.
Okay.
And this predates social media, but I do believe social media has compounded the problem
Tremendously.
When people are depressed, one of the worst things that they can do is isolate. And isolate compounds their depression.
Yeah.
And it's been proven that social media is not an effective human interaction.
No,
it is not.
It's not. I mean, nothing beats what me and you are doing right here. Or going out to, have a beer one day, or just playing cards. And now people sit at home and social media themselves for hours and think that they're getting that social interaction, and actually they make their mental status worse when they are vulnerable to depression and suicidal thoughts and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
That's
agree.
my hypothesis. I may be right, I may be wrong.
No, I think we both agree with you. Social media is a bane. I mean, it forces you, like you said, back into social isolation where you're pretending or you're tricking yourself into thinking you're getting some sort of social interaction.
A version of you that doesn't exist.
Or the version of other people that don't exist, too.
Yeah.
You're constantly seeing the best parts of everyone else's life, because most people don't put the negative or the mundane parts of their lives on social media. They put the highlights. So you're constantly seeing everyone's highlights while you're socially isolated. The math makes sense.
Yeah.
And look, I'll apologize up front to the people of New Zealand, but I had a nurse friend who spent 4 or 5 years there. I met her at Burning Man, and her husband lived there. She worked in an emergency room. She's like, it's very seldom we saw psychiatric or mental patients. It's just, they just don't exist like they do in the United States and New Zealand. Again, her opinion, I don't know if it's actual fact, but that's what she observed.
Yeah, I mean, some would say that we're having a mental health pandemic.
Yeah, definitely a crisis of sorts.
Just a crisis that is anxiety. Everybody's got anxiety now, but I do think that has to do with the isolation factor, and it's just self-perpetuating. You really kind of just, sitting in a box at home and everybody's remote. You could get your groceries delivered. You don't have to interact with anyone anymore. And like you said yourself, in the 80s, you had to run to the local payphone that was surrounded by you had to try hard to not be social.
Yeah.
It's the opposite now. You have to try to be social.
I think there's also that. Well, I think there's an argument in tandem with that. Yes, you can absolutely isolate, but I think much like before social media, before cell phones, how many people would you interact with on a daily basis? 5 or 10. If you're at work, you might interact with quite a few more. In the first hour of my morning, I could have 10 people texting or calling or emailing. I've got 10 basic interactions within an hour of waking up that 35 years ago, I would have only had maybe 0 or 1 interactions at that point in my day. And then that would be my entire day's worth. Now people have basically unlimited access to you, and I can have, I had 60 phone calls one day last week. I had literally 60 phone calls in a day. Like, I don't think humans are quite geared to that level of interaction or that level of dependency either. Could also be feeding into it.
And let's couple this with chemical dependency.
Yeah.
The two go hand in hand. Either, you could start out as a chemical dependent person and develop psychosis and other, mental issues through that, or you could be using chemicals to deal with past traumas or with depression and then become an addict. And before it's just a vicious spiral. And before you know it, you're out on the streets.
Yeah. And they're taking advantage heavily with this fentanyl crisis. I tell you what, seems pretty detrimental.
Fentanyl's in everything now. Like, I'm scared to eat an Oreo. like,
you should be scared to eat an
fentanyl
Oreo,
is in everything. Yeah.
They're vegan. It's okay.
They're also fireproof. Did you know that?
Yeah, I've seen that.
You can make a shield out of them, which is not good. Yeah, not good. It's a tricky world. You have to go out of your way nowadays to support yourself mentally, because the average screen time is just going up and up and up. I think about 5.5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, it's like average right now
is
for
average
millennials.
A day.
Yeah, the Gen Z is even higher.
Yeah.
Gen Z is like eight plus.
8 hours a day. That's a full-time job on your phone.
You can't be producing.
Dopamine dumping is what it is, and when we talk about a chemical response as well, that is an addiction. That is something that you have to find a balance for at the end of the day. And what do? We do drugs, we do alcohol, we smoke weed, whatever it is. There's a vice to supplement that. You have to pay the toll back to that 8 hours a day. Not even, and on top of that, you're talking about the blue light, and now no one's sleeping anymore because they're doing 90 minutes of phone time before and falling asleep to that. That's not good for you. So now no one's getting deeper sleep, and they're not getting that body healing that they were supposed to.
I'm glad you said dopamine dumping. Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's a neurophysicist out of Stanford, had a really great podcast on Jocko that explained all the neurotransmitters and how they all worked. And he explained gambling. And he's like, you put a quarter in the machine, and if it gave you a quarter every single time, you lose interest after maybe a dozen quarters. But you put a quarter in, you don't get nothing. You put another quarter in, and in 12 quarters later, you get a quarter. You get a what? A dopamine squirt. And you chase that dopamine squirt. And not just in gambling, but with anything. You could be addicted to, social media, whatever. However you're going to get your fix, you will chase it.
Yes.
And the self-awareness to figure that out is so key to breaking that chain.
Yeah. And it's forced things. Christian and I are big fans of, hot cold therapy, right? Getting in the sauna, getting in the cold plunge. You have to force yourself to do things to heal your body. Otherwise, another big thing too, the sun, so important. Vitamin D. Most people, 9 out of 10 people have a vitamin D deficiency. Getting in for 10 minutes a day, the natural world red light but everybody has to make everything artificial.
Yeah, red light panels. We have the sun right
I,
there.
I'm glad you brought that up. Huberman explained that on the Jocko podcast about early morning light,
Yeah.
Yes.
what it does to you. And you can't get it inside a vehicle, and you can't get it with sunglasses
No.
on. So he said, if the only light you're going to get is driving to work, drive with your window down for
Yeah.
10 minutes. It only takes that amount of
Yeah.
time. He also talked about body temperature and how it helps you sleep or how it helps you wake up.
Yep.
And then catching that dawn or that dusk sunlight
Yeah.
Yep.
late in the afternoon for 15 minutes, how it triggers your body's temperature reduction and causes you to sleep better if you don't have the blue light before you go to bed.
Yeah.
And
It's
that's
an excellent
the,
podcast.
that's we got to think of things as a balance, right? And the central nervous system, this is what there is so much research and conversations about this now, is balancing out that sympathetic versus parasympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. And as Christian mentioned, when we're taking 60, 70 calls a day, when we're expected to respond to an email within an hour of it being sent now, in the 80s, you didn't have to deal with that. I'm going to send via Pony Express a mail and I'll get back to you 2 weeks later on, a written letter. And you didn't have to do that anymore. But but balancing that nervous system is so important. That's what, dawn and dusk light do for you, is to reset that. That's what cold and hot therapies do for you as well. So you're not spiraling when you're in fight or flight. This is why people can't sleep after deployments, because they're always at this heightened, and every little noise will keep them amped up and ready to go, because they have to either fight or flight. So
Yeah, man, I sure do applaud you guys for that cold plunge stuff. I could never be a Navy SEAL just for having to be cold and wet. If it was a warm, dry thing, dude, I'd be a Navy SEAL in a second.
Yeah. It was nice and comfortable.
yeah, it's a funny one too, because you hear negative stuff too. Is like, oh, you think you're a man because you're jumping into a tub of cold water. Well, yeah, you gotta put yourself through artificially challenging moments nowadays, because it's not really that challenging. I mean, yes, we have mental hurdles that we have to overcome. The 60 calls, like we said, but the challenges, you have to force challenges on yourself to have that mental acuity to push forward.
Cold is a great one too for that, because I cold plunge 4 days a week usually, and every single time I do not want to get in that thing. So it's usually the hardest part. Same thing with the sauna. Like I prefer the cold to the sauna personally. That's my personal preference. So I have more of a challenge with getting into the sauna and staying there for 20 minutes. But that's usually the hardest part of my day. Even if I have 60 phone calls, the hardest part of my day is staying in that sauna for 20 minutes while I'm sweating and dying and breathing heavy and like, oh my goodness, I'm ready to get out of this thing. But as soon as I'm done, I feel great. I feel better. And if that's the hardest part of my day, everything else is a little bit easier too.
And it forces your mind to be focused on the task at hand. And I think that is the most important aspect of it.
Being present.
It forces presence in a world of non-presence. I mean, we don't have to be present at all. When we're staring at our phone for 8 hours a day, we're not present. We're somewhere else. This is why shower conversations are the best. We solve all of these arguments in the shower because we usually don't have external stimuli, right? Some of us listen to music, but taking the time to just shut everything else off and endure the suck. This is why adventure therapies for veterans work. When I take people fishing or on a hike or something like that, when you do something that's shitty most of the time, you're so focused on that. 3 hours pass, you go, oh wow, I took a 3-hour break from being in my head about the post-traumatic stress, about the anxiety, about all this stuff. And that is what recalibrates and resets the central nervous system.
Yeah, I've only done cold plunge once. And I can assure you, I wasn't thinking of anything other than trying to survive.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I was not thinking about what I was cooking for supper.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about the Super Bowl. I was just like, I got to get out of this in 4 minutes.
Yeah.
And how did you feel once you got out of it in 4 minutes, though, and dried off?
I did feel better.
Yeah.
I really did. Um, and one of our co-directors bought a swimming pool, and he got it in October. And down here in Louisiana, it gets down to 40, 50 degrees at the worst. So the water temperature's, high 50s.
Yeah.
And he did it this winter, and he's like, "Bro, you got to do this." Yeah.
It's life changing. It's got a lot of positive benefits. I mean, there's they say after 3.5 to 4 minutes of cold exposure, below 55 degrees is where the study lies. But it's a bump in serotonin up to 200% throughout the day, or dopamine,
Well,
excuse me, throughout the day.
And Huberman spoke about that. He said
Yeah.
you don't have to go 6 minutes, 7
Yeah.
minutes, 10 minutes. There's no gain.
Yeah.
That sweet spot is 4 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, and that's usually what I shoot for personally. I prefer the cold after the sauna too. I do the sauna for 20 minutes straight into the cold. So I'm 25-ish minutes all in, and I feel fantastic. It helps me set up for the rest of my evening. I'm able to wind down after that, relax my body. I've got that good static cardio, that good recovery. It primes me to eat, and I'm ready to sleep right after that.
It's exactly it. Once again, it is proven that it recalibrates to a parasympathetic.
Yeah. That and the all-cause mortality piece too with sauna. So it's a Finnish study after some 40-odd year study that they did in Finland with. This is traditional saunas. This is not infrared saunas. I think that's different. But three times a week, 20 minutes reduces all-cause mortality by upwards of 40%, which is an astounding number. Which means you could prolong your life tremendously and avoid all sorts of comorbidities outside of
clearing out
the normal things.
Yeah, like the benefits
Yeah.
are there.
Well, you guys had spoke a little bit about flight career.
Yeah. Sorry, we're going off on crazy tangents.
No, it's okay. I was going to try to recenter.
Yeah.
But I wanted to do everything at Acadian. I wanted to be well-rounded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I wanted to figure out all the parts that made Acadian Ambulance work. So I asked, and I got into the education department. I taught orientation. I got into communication and dispatch for a while. I became a recruiter, and I just never said no to anything that they asked. If it wasn't illegal or immoral, I just did it. And
maybe questionable.
Well, we'll talk about Katrina later about being, throwing that rule book out the window. But
Sure.
It helped me understand why things were important to different support groups, and it helped me get to where I was at now. So I really thank all the people that allowed me to go into their department part-time and try everything out.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. It gives you a more well-rounded vision and view and understanding of how and why things happen the way that they do too within the organization, right? Why you can't get funding for something or why something doesn't work a certain way. You have a better understanding. So you became an instructor as well, right? After your flight paramedic, you became an instructor after that?
Correct. Yeah. So I got my cert as a paramedic instructor, and I taught EMTs for a while.
Okay.
There was a time where Acadian had a small industrial medicine group, and we were teaching, oil field companies, CPR, first aid. And there was 2 of us doing it, and they kind of asked which one wanted to go full-time doing it. I really wanted a flight career full-time. So Scott Saunier took that job and grew the whole training department and became a huge part of our industrial medicine group.
Okay.
Where we were training hundreds of people a day. We built a whole training center with a hotel that could accommodate 100 students.
Wow.
Cranes, water survival, firefighting training. It was just a very large group. And I enjoyed my instructor training, but I realized that was not what I wanted to do as a career.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very specific path for some people. Some people love instruction. Some people are not so much a fan of it. I was an instructor in the military, and that was one of my favorite things to do was to teach new students. But there was a lot of guys who were just wasn't their thing, which I completely understand. You want to stay more operational and actually do the mission. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep. I taught a lot of EMT classes. Taught one. I was an adjunct in a paramedic class, and then when Medicare defined that there was a critical care level of service, we developed an in-house critical care course, and we started teaching that. I taught a few rounds of CCT, the ventilator section, and some of the cardiology until our company formed the National EMS Academy, and that's where our EMTs, our paramedics are taught, and they teach the critical care transport course, as well as produce all the CBTs for in-house education for us. Another huge group that we have now.
Wow.
So you mentioned Katrina and how you threw the rule book away. I'm curious. There's a story there, obviously.
Yeah, so let me prime you guys up just a little bit about Acadian ambulance. We wear dress uniforms at the time. Everybody had press shirts. It was always a yes ma'am, no sir type of service. If they requested it and it wasn't illegal or immoral, we did it. And we were in the EMS Today conference in New Orleans on the Wednesday before Katrina made landfall on the Sunday. We saw it coming. And then on the Friday, we knew it was going to hit New Orleans. And they issued the mandatory evacuation on the Saturday. We had AirMed 1, the Lafayette helicopter, in that convention center, folded up the blades, drug it out on Saturday, flew it back to Lafayette, and we flew down to New Orleans Saturday night, Sunday, and evacuated until the winds got, I don't know, about 30 miles an hour. And I think we flew out of St. Bernard Parish, which took as bad of a lick as Orleans, but for that afternoon. And I can remember this big, giant, big screen projection TV. And it was like the whole Gulf of Mexico. And Katrina was like occupying 90% of the Gulf of Mexico, really ominous looking. And there's 6 bull cows that are all 20 years old. And I'm like, please let all these things start. We got them out. We sheltered in Alexandria, Louisiana, and we came back the following day. And the phone calls from Orleans started when the levees broke. It was flooding hospitals. So throughout the night, Monday night, Mike Saunier, who is now the vice president of the comm center and air services, was in the comm center fielding all these calls. Tulane Hospital was the one that was flooded with a lot of neonatal ICU patients. So he called me up Monday night, packed up an ice chest, packed up a little go box full of goodies, and myself and Tony Kramer headed out on Tuesday morning at about 7. Flying over the sugarcane fields, the sugarcane is standing straight up. Like, man, this doesn't look like they took a really bad hit. And when we crossed Causeway, every house had water up to its eaves.
Wow.
And just hundreds of people on houses. And we looked at each other with big eyes and we said the OF word. And we landed at Tulane about 15 minutes later on a parking garage that Mike had worked with the maintenance department of that hospital to take the light poles down because they didn't have a helipad. So we used the parking garage as a makeshift helipad and walked down and found the administrator. They had a whole list of names of kids, adults that they needed to be flown out. And we implemented the triage system, which that was the first, I would say we stayed in the rule book for that. But our philosophy of the yes ma'am, no sir, that was the first time we kind of stepped out of that. That hospital expected we were going to take all of their patients out, but quite honestly, not all of their patients were critical patients.
Sure.
So we flew out in ICU babies most of the day. We went to Baptist Hospital around 1 o'clock that afternoon, maybe 2 o'clock. So for you guys that are listening, that's the hospital where there was the accusation of euthanasia of a group of long-term acute care patients.
Mm.
We flew patients out of there until we couldn't fly at night any longer. The fog had set in. Two totally different approaches. Tulane had a very organized, they knew where their patients were going. They had called ahead. But granted, they had only lost power that morning.
Mm.
The other hospital, Baptist, had lost power 36 hours before. The windows didn't open, so they had no air conditioning. So all of their critical patients were lined up on the walkway to the helipad, most of them being bagged.
Mm.
None of them had medical records, and none of them had a destination. So we flew those patients to not the most capable hospital, just the closest hospital where we could drop patients off to.
Wow.
And we recognized going to all of these hospitals was taking aircraft out of service for hours at a time. So the next day we started flying patients to the airport at Moisant, which was 7 to 10 nautical miles away from the center of the city.
Okay.
And what that did was we had rapid return and we were able to affect a lot more patients per hour.
Mm.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Also that day is when we kind of got out of professional uniform and started wearing shorts and t-shirts.
Yeah.
Some of us were armed,
Yeah.
which was totally different. The Air Force were moving patients out of the Moisant where we were dropping them off. But at that time, they didn't have a critical care network, or that's what I was, at least what was told to us. So by Friday, we had evacuated patients out of all the hospitals and to the airport. And we were told that a lot of the criticals were still at the airport.
Mm.
We had a lot of people that were in the shelter of last resort. That's the Superdome.
Yeah.
And you probably heard about all the stories about all the violence.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it got bad enough on Thursday where we had to stop hauling patients and we had to evacuate our staff out of there. I landed with the first Bocal, and we had a whole bunch of staff that crawled into this Bocal in every little nook and cranny. And we pulled pitch, the helicopter wouldn't move. So I got out because I knew they were coming back, and we were behind these Jersey barriers with some military guys, and they all had M16s and no magazines and no rounds. So we got our team out of there. The next day, we started evacuating patients out of the hospital, out of the airport.
Okay.
And we were going all over the state of Louisiana. We evacuated that airport by Sunday. And then we set up operations in a lot of the affected areas. And when I say we kind of threw the rule book out, it was out of necessity. It wasn't out of, just not wanting to follow the rules.
Oh, absolutely.
You had a lot of patients, and you had to figure out ways in what has been converted into a third world country overnight on how to get things done. And there were a lot of innovations. There were babies that were delivered at the Superdome, and we had medics that found milk and were using rubber gloves as like baby bottles and poke a little hole in the thumb, and the baby nursed off of it. We used Kentwood water boxes, the big cardboard boxes, to move well babies. So put 8 well babies in a box, cover them all up with a blanket, put an oxygen tube in there, turn on some oxygen, and put 2 boxes in a Bocal. And the flight plan was, 19 patients on board. Yeah,
Wow. That's so
we
crazy.
just did lots of things like that.
Yeah.
It's almost like the emergency services version of wartime environment. I mean, you can't follow the playbook to the T, when the situation is that dynamically changing at every second. I mean, that's erratic,
Too much chaos.
chaotic. Yeah. Well, that's incredible.
You know,
Go ahead.
what's funny about hurricanes in regards to, emergency medical services is the staff becomes feral really quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are.
You know what I mean? They grabbing snacks and whatnot everywhere. They getting out of uniform and whatnot, and to get them unferal takes a lot longer than it takes to go feral, if that makes any sense. So the recovery time to get everybody back in a professional atmosphere doesn't take long to go or feral, but it takes a lot longer to get everybody back.
6 months and they stop wearing their Hawaiian t-shirts.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I was a victim of that, man. It just operated like we had to operate for a few months
Yeah.
in this environment, and you had to all right, we got to get back to business.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an unprecedented time, and it was an unprecedented failure on the federal side too. I mean, they came in way too late, way too small with the amount of impact that Katrina had on that area. I think they were far too late and far too low on the budget, I guess. I think it was an unprecedented failure. But, I think we have since learned from that because we have guys like you and we have people like the Cajun Navy who stepped up and who have helped out at every single hurricane or major natural disaster since, what was that, 2009 was Katrina, right? So the last 15, 16 years, we've had the Cajun Navy step up, and we've done work with them. I was on pretty much every major hurricane in the last decade or so, between Harvey and Florence and Sandy and all of those. I did, helicopter pickups. And so I understand what you mean by the devastation, seeing people on the rooftops. It's kind of a helmet fire when you get out there, like, where do I start? What do I do today? There's so many places to start and so many people to help. Like, just got to.
When it comes to that, I like to tell people, just do something.
Yeah. It's eating an elephant.
Don't do nothing.
Yeah.
Just do something. You're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
I like to say this: there's good that comes out of everything, and out of Katrina, and especially out of Harvey, and the other big hurricanes. We had 4 Cat 4 hurricanes hit Louisiana in 1 year. We've gotten better.
Yes.
We've recognized that hurricanes just don't hit the public; they hit first responders too.
Mm-hmm.
And when you wipe out 20 or 30% of your first responders' homes, well, they can't come to work.
Yeah.
So we built infrastructure to support the first responders that are impacted so we can get them back to work.
Smart.
Because if you don't have people to run the hurricane never gets any better.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've developed shower trailers, laundry trailers, sleeping arrangements, forward operating bases with fuel cells. We converted some old ambulances into refrigerated trucks. So when these things hit, we could pack it up full of meat, full of frozen goods.
Nice.
Set up a fob, and we can cook 3 hots. You have your cots. You can feed and water people indefinitely. And that's how we get better every year.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible. Well, I mean, it all started with your roping buddy too. It just inspired you to go on this lifelong pursuit for emergency medical services. It's incredible. I mean, the experience you have. I just have to thank you for everything that you've done, for signing the dotted line for our U.S. Army, as well as continuing that service to take care of the public and everyone else.
Yeah, man. No thanks needed. I really think fate or God put me into this position and gave me good people that I worked with to teach me. They gave me good mentors that supervised me because I needed some supervision. But I am who I am because of the Clay Henrys, who's a communications center vice president, the Cecil Gilbos, the Ken Dortezes, all of my staff that I work with. I have 100 direct reports, 100 indirect reports, and they've all made me better.
Sure.
And without them, without all of my mentors, I'm just another dude that was roping cows one day.
Well, you were also given a challenge and you rose to it, Mark. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are still here because of you and because of the work that you've done and the impact that you've had. So thanks for very much for your time today. Thanks very much for sharing such a big part of your life with us. And we wish you the best.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, man. It's been a great time.
Absolutely. We really enjoyed it.
Appreciate you.
This has been the Medevac Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching today. Make sure you interact with the video somehow. Leave a review. We would do the same for you. We'll see you guys next week. Bye.
See you next time.